Forward. When the writer of this book asked me to write a forward, my first question was, what kind of book are you writing? I remember a long and uncomfortable pause as this book's progenitor stared off into space, leaving terra firma, however long non-temporal moments like those actually last. I asked the question again, then added, if you write a romance novel, I will personally see you are quieted away and quarantined forever, and then some. I meant it in humor, of course, and I understand that all of the author's current multi-generational epic soap opera stories are actually not too bad. It wouldn't hurt to introduce myself, so you'll all forgive the digression. I am a retired chief from the Justice Grimm. I was commissioner shortly before my retirement. I originally found the writer of this skullduggery as a sort of confidential informant before he had officially joined. This is where his understanding and ease of access when communicating with the so-called evildoers of Grimm and her neighboring realms comes from. Here in Justice Grimm, we tend to work on both sides of the morality, and that the life of the fairy tale creatures comes with isn't always necessarily morally defined. The fate of the villains from the stories that you can think of have mostly been sort of vigilante justice with a few self-defense. Please, that merit investigation, by the way. No one, for instance, knows where the queen from Snow White landed after she was struck by lightning. To this day, we don't even know if anything about Snow White is true, as everything that we got on this case comes from Doc, the only surviving member of that family, and it's possible that with the help of Dopey and possibly Grumpy, that Doc had the others stabbed in the back and tossed their bodies down a mine shaft. It has never been proven, but I long have suspected that it was Dopey who finally did Grumpy in and then killed himself by jumping down that mine shaft, which is how we ended up discovering the rest of the bodies in the first place. End of digression. The story continues. The eventual response from the author a couple days later as he walked into my office was comedy. He shouted a joyously dark fantasy comedy. Now it was my turn to stare into the oblivion that he had been stewing in over that weekend, and honestly, the place left a metallic taste in my mouth just considering it. What's the premise? I asked, thinking that if he said anything vampire romance related that I would pull my sidearm and shoot him between the eyes. In fact, I could feel my hand even begin to slip towards the holster of my hips as I waited to hear his idea.
The bad guys are the villains, the ones from the old fairy tales. I mean, we are the punishment force for all those grim legends. So let's get some of their stories, he said.
I let all the tension from my arm relax, and my fingers drifted away from the side of the holster. The author swallowed dryly and then cleared his throat. So, will you write it? He asked me again. Who are you going to interview first? I replied. Are you going in chronological order? Well, sure, why not, he replied, and then I proceeded to tell him about how a journalist from the Heartland tried a similar stunt and even paid a necroman to do some interviews with the ones that we couldn't arrest. The entire book was fabrication after fabrication, and mostly just propaganda from the minds of the most twisted children. Story. Villains this side of reality has ever known. He nodded. Yeah, I know, I read the file. Indeed, he had. He even helped to type it up and submit it to archive. So you want to pick up where he left off? That was a poor choice of words. That journalist in question ended up being decapitated. It won't be like that. I mean, like what happened with the Queen of Hearts. He told me I'm a 6-year veteran here in containment, and any psychological manipulation they can throw at me won't work a second time. He went on about how it would be only up and up, and that's when I interrupted him. Yo, it's lunch. Let's go take one before the union rep gets on our case about not taking a lunch again. So while we walk to the cafeteria, the long stretch of the cell doors, various dens of despair and regret and agony drift from the prisoners if you get eaten. The stabbed, transformed, or cursed, it doesn't come back on me. I asked suspiciously. He nodded like I said, up and up. And that's how the writer of all this messing around convinced me to write this forward. He has since left the containment to work for the Executioner Ministry, but his work here and elsewhere has actually spawned a whole department of wacky online sensations. I had to remind this author a couple 100,000 times to redact this and expunge that, and I'm pretty sure he did no such thing. And if there was any blowback from the copyright guy, well, we haven't seen any. We don't really plan it, who really cares? So I basically summed up the most important part to know and how this book came to be, as well as the step-by-step exposition about how I wrote this forward, and it is with great interpretation. I mean, okay, you can leave that in if you want. Digressing, no one is better connecting the dots than the author of this tomfoolery, even the dots that have no right being connected. However, all the work he put into the Cinderella versus her godmother over the outrageous terms and conditions regarding her in the time limit imposed on her road staff, in case you didn't read the paper. Cinderella took the fairy quack for every single penny that she was worth, and that was mainly due because she did not get any of it in writing. Indeed, the writer's legacy is far more brilliant than the stack of write-up and complaints across every department suggests. Without his colorful approach to breaking the rules to the point of just barely failing upward enough to keep his job, you can see that the author is a good union man, but it's not where his mistrust of authority and his stubborn resistance to authoritarians in general comes from. So without further delay, and I trust you'll thank me later, for the interlude seems all too brief for me, the first chapter.